Hello, I'm extremely pleased to welcome you and, well, thank you for agreeing to this interview. I will start with relatively standard questions. Now we'll proceed to sort of more in-depth questions about like piano performance, interpretation.
Yeah.
So it's all is going to be evolving around music anyway. So my first question, like an intro, would be, you have a rather unusual biography. So you started your piano studies relatively late, later than many other pianists, and then you started studying literature, and then you came back to the piano. So I assume during the time when most of your peers, people your age, were practicing their scales and etudes and stuff like that, you were doing something else. So is there any impact of that on your further career, or how did your study of literature affect your musicianship?
Okay, so there are several questions in one.
Yeah, exactly.
About the late start, I actually keep in mind some very important approach from a French pedagogue, a genius pedagogue of the 20th century, Nadia Boulanger. Nadia Boulanger was studying with Gabriel Fauré. She had the highest training we could imagine, because at that time, studying music didn't mean just studying an instrument. It was a general approach with harmony, counterpoint, writing, and all was going together. And you would hardly approach the big repertoire before having an idea of how it's made and how the craftsmanship. So you could get closer to the composer. And then when you approach a Beethoven sonata, there are things that have become part of your DNA before you start practicing. So I didn't have this training, but somehow, as my main center of interest was the music rather than the piano as an instrument, I would not say that starting at the age of 9, 10 is late, because at the age of 9, 10 you are still a child, about to become a teenager, and at this moment I think it's hard for me to imagine that before this age you can really be interested in how the music is made, because actually as a child you can practice from a very early age, but developing an understanding of what you are doing, it's hard to imagine that you can develop this when you are a very little child. So, and me, when I started, I was really interested to understand what's going on with the music. And the fact that I didn't have like, how to say, quite a straight path with the music education can be explained by the fact that I was looking for someone, if we talk about a teacher, who would actually introduce me with facts related to music, and not explain to me what fingering, what, where, how to play, like more crescendo, piano, forte, like all these things. For me, this is things that are nice to tell once the structure, the biggest things are already assimilated. And I was looking for someone, and I didn't find the person to actually help me with these things. So I was trying to look for these informations by myself, which was very hard because I didn't have an environment around me with people who knew a lot about the music. My family I have a lot of music lovers in my family, but nobody who reached before me like a high interest with the music and started to practice hard an instrument. There was nobody in my family. So nobody in my environment could really show me a way. Also, I was growing up in a small city, and in the city there was a school of music, but there the practice it was nice music making, but nothing that would actually dig deep into the pieces. And I was really looking for somebody who would help me with that. So after a few years of getting so passionate about the music that I would read anything that would fall in my hands, any score that I would find, even like extremely difficult repertoire, Chopin ballades, Scherzi, Liszt, Mephistopheles, or sonata, I got passionate about this very early actually. So I started to study these pieces on my own at the age of 11 or 12, which is now quite early if you consider the pieces, you know. So it's not so easy to say early, late, or it all depends on what you do. And again, thinking about Nadia Boulanger actually invited in her class some musicians that started studying music at the age of 25, even 30. And she motivated, she supported, I don't remember the name of this person, but a man who started his concert career in his 30s. He could not find the support anywhere else, because anywhere else he was told he's too old. But Nadia said, welcome to my class, and we will try to do she was more requiring for the people who had like higher goals. The people who entered her class and just wanted to get more familiar with this or that, to just improve their practice, she would be quite light, but she would actually adapt to the student, which is something that is very important for me, and this is also something that I got with the first real teacher of interpretation that I got with Rena Shereshevskaya, who comes from Russia but teaches in France for 40 years now. So she has strong elements from the Russian school, but also integrated some elements of the French school. And she would, in her way to teach, she would adapt to any student she would have. She would not have the same requirement for all the students, you know? So then it's not like when you listen to a student and you can recognize the class, you can recognize the teacher behind the student. With Rena, it's impossible because there are so many different profiles, you know? And this is something very important because rather than considering a student as a student, it's important to consider a student as an artist and to encourage the development of the artistry, the independence of mind, the critical thinking and things like this. And as I was hardly finding someone for this, I always been a very strong temper, a very strong temperament, and I could not accept a teacher that would not actually have this philosophy of independence of mind, critical thinking, who would accept actually to be criticized also, which is very important because as an artist, you need the critical thinking with the scores when you approach. You cannot just play what is and obey to something. You need character, temperament, take decisions, be strong with your choices. Otherwise, if you don't believe yourself in what you are doing, nobody will believe what you are doing. It's the same as a composer. Of course, if you are not encouraged by the composition teachers to develop your own voice, nothing will happen. If you are just like following
get lost,
the rules, of course, nothing can really happen. So, of course, on my path, everything that I grabbed on the way, passion for literature, passion for painting. I started before studying music, I was actually passionate about drawing and painting. So I started a bit of that and I'm still passionate about this. Literature also became a big passion for me. So I started reading a lot, taking notes on what I was reading and reading everything actually, also like psychology, history, and I need to learn. I constantly need to learn. I'm very curious. And I think that it doesn't harm the music practice to actually learn things that are not always related strictly to music, but it helps to just have a wider view, to open the mind to many things, and then it brings only more inspiration to your interpretations. So yes, my path was not straight. I also played the bass in a rock band. I also played jazz. I earned my life as a piano bar. I did piano bar for several years and earned my life like this. And all this kind of fed my approach, fed my way to practice, to have a wider idea about how we practice music, because I was interested in practicing music, not the piano. Piano is a dead instrument if you don't bring your musicianship. And the musicianship is many things. It's writing music, improvising, listening to many different kinds of music, reading, just developing all these, I would dare say, techniques that are not strictly practice techniques, but how to listen, how to actually build a musical phrase, getting inspired by poetry, for example, how a period, is built, where is the culmination point of the phrase and everything. There are many common points between music and literature, So I can only say that all these things probably enriched my musical luggage.
Well, thank you for actually answering a few of questions without even me asking them. I was going to, but well, that's absolutely great to see to have your insight. Just one more question about literature, because preparing for this interview, I watched a few other interviews of you. So, well, in one of them, you share your fascination with the language. And you say that, well, just like language, music can express different emotions, express anger, express fear, express positive emotions, etc. And then I remembered this quote from Arthur Schnabel, who was complaining of people saying, and being wrong by saying, well, I don't understand the language of this music. He says music is just one language.
Absolutely.
And if you have, if you know the language, it's not guaranteed that you would understand all books written in that language. So, what's your opinion about that? Is music one
Yes.
language, or maybe music have
So
different?
I am a bit oriented musically, so I accept that not everything that people call music I can deal with the same interest and bringing my best. So there are kinds of what we call music with which I deal with difficulty. I will take the example, the main example, like recent example, when it's about atonal music. First, with my way of perceiving music as the language, I think that it's actually impossible for music to be atonal. Because when it's atonal, it's still referring to tonal language. It's opposing to something, but defining itself by opposing to something. So the tonal music is present even in atonal music. So the reference I would choose would always be the tonal language, with the main structure as in the spoken language you have a subject, a verb, and a complement that can be an adjective or something. In the music, the main structure is always the same. It's, or in minor, it's the perfect cadenza with the subdominant, the dominant, and the tonic. And from this base, everything starts. This structure you find in any music all over the world, because it's the main, the overtones. When you listen to this, you will it defines the fifths. So actually, there is a relationship between this bass and the main, the home key. There is a fifth, the fifth down, and with the dominant, it's a fifth up. So it's all defined by this, and this you find in any kind of music. Even some modern composers like Bartók, he was still, even if it sounds very dissonant, he was still using this as the reference. Even in Stravinsky, he was still using this as a reference for all that he would build on these major elements. And you can do a lot of things from that. When you think about it's still like subdominant, dominant, tonic. Subdominant, dominant, tonic. Subdominant, dominant, subdominant, subdominant, tonic, subdominant. It's dominant, tonic, dominant. So the whole music is structured with this main, how to say this, this main root for the organization of the time. So the three dimensions of the music, which are melody, harmony, and rhythm, they are intertwined, they are interconnected. And there is not like the rhythm isolated on one side, like the rhythm would be the metronome and exactitude, vertical exactitude, and the harmony being just like the vertical development through the chord of a melody, like let's say a vertical melody, and the melody being the horizontal.
The extension of the melody.
Yeah, it's a bit more mixed and melt and subtle than this. So the harmony is also bringing part of the rhythm and the melody. Of course, the rhythm of the melody, when you talk about the rhythm in a piece, you talk about several kinds of rhythm. You talk about the rhythm of the melody, the rhythm of the harmony, and the rhythm of the rhythmical values. It can be the accompaniment or the inner voices, counterpoint, or everything. All this needs stability. And the reference would be this that was fixed in the musical language somehow, even if it's artificial. Of course it's artificial when you have a cadenza, it's artificial. So modern composer could say, yeah, but if it's artificial, I can also build my artificial stability. But I would say good luck to find something as strong as this. You know, it's not for random that it was fixed after generations and generations of composers looking for some sort of stability. And it was the stability was found with a classical style. So wherever you go in the history of the Western music, you will always fall to the classical style because this is where it got the most fixed. And then it's no surprise that it went together with a moment when the people were writing operas and where the music was going together with a written drama, with an action. So the music was here to sustain written drama, and so every harmony, every melody was here to actually represent a psychology of a situation, like you see in the Mozart operas, that the harmony is used in order to get a psychological effect. And this can work only if there is a familiar thing in the ear of the listener, even for the ones who are not musicians. You know, if I play this, then everybody will understand that there was a problem. you know?
Right.
And even not knowing music. And here everybody will, oh, this is not what we expected. And this is still working now in the 21st century. So when there is a conception of the music of an evolution, you know, it had to be, yeah, first it was like quite primary, and then like the history of painting, and then Baroque, and then classic, and then Romantic, and then it was more and more complex. No, Mozart is a complexity on its own, and Mozart, we can still fully receive his musical message now as 21st century people. So there is nothing after Mozart. Mozart is found his own end, his own achievement in itself. The same for Bach. How can we imagine something more complex and developed than Bach? Bach is a whole universe. Chopin is a whole universe. Stravinsky is a whole universe. And they kind of explored anything they could with their musical sensitivity to build a whole universe. There is nothing, like, of course, there is everything before they could actually get inspired by. But then what comes after doesn't mean that it's more evolved. You know, it's like sometimes in some history of painting, you would see, yeah, in the Middle Ages, they ignored the perspective, and so it was more like naive. But they knew exactly what they were doing. And the perspective that then came for the Rinascimento, it was an aesthetic choice. It was a choice. It was not just, oh, we discovered the
just
the
learned how to
perspective.
do it.
Yeah, no, they knew. They knew. When you see what they were able to achieve, building cathedrals, how would you build a cathedral not knowing the perspective? Of course they knew. They just chose other ways when it was about painting to express things and to represent things. So the perspective is a revolution in the history, but a revolution because it had to go, it went with the necessity of expression, you know, and it was still not getting rid of everything that was before, which I find a bit strange in the 20th century, not only in music, but this wish to, it's understanding also because of the history, the horrors that arrived in the 20th century, the catastrophes, the genocides, the massacres, that the artists, they wanted to find new airs, and they wanted to find a new inspiration. It's completely understandable. But why would it require the annihilation, the like canceling everything? It was already a kind of cancel culture at that time, you know? And why? It doesn't bring much. It would bring you maybe a bit of satisfaction that you don't deal with some things that belong to the old times that did so many massacres and horrible things. But it's a very short-term relief because you will just feel, okay, no, I'm not writing in tonal music anymore. So because the tonal music was also what Hitler was listening to, and yeah, so it might bring a bit of satisfaction at a small moment. But then what do you do? What you create? How do you actually communicate strongly the musical information? How do you build a structure apart from the tonal language that would have this power? So for me, it's relevant only if the expression you are looking for doesn't need this power and that you want to express something else. For example, the freedom of the sounds and the texture and something else. But if you want to actually create a musical drama with a tension in the time and everything, up to this date, now in the 21st century, there was nothing stronger than the tonal system. To create that, to build a 1 hour long symphony, or Tristan and Isolde, for example, it requires the tonal structure. Otherwise, you cannot build this tension. It's impossible. Maybe there is another way, but nobody found yet what it is. So it's a huge introduction I made. Sorry, just about this fact that. Remind me exactly the terms of the question, because
whether music was one language or
yes.
Music may speak different languages.
So I belong to the family of musicians who really believe that the language we are talking about is the tonal one, and that even the atonal experimentations, they are related to this language. They are reacting to this language, you know? And I'm always thinking that what is very funny in very experimental, like modern composers of the 20th century, is that most of them kept the same instruments. They didn't need to create new instruments, and they kept even the forms. So the Boulez second sonata is still a sonata form. Why?
Well, not necessarily the same sonata form.
It's taking some freedom, but as well as Beethoven was taking some freedom from the sonata form. There is nothing like a school, but it's still a sonata form. You can still identify a B, a development section. So he got rid of the rules of the harmonies and built the serial universe of sound, but still keeping all the other parameters of, like Schoenberg did, for example, dodecaphonic, but keeping the rules of the classic. So then there is something a bit mysterious for me, that if we are working for a revolution, Why to be obsessed about the harmonic parameter and not want to change all the other ones?
Well, Webern didn't do that.
Yes, well, yes, he did, but still, you can recognize in his form, it's still canon, counterpoint, it's still like...
So it's like
it
older, rather older forms.
Yes, always like theme and variations. I mean, this is nothing revolutionary there. It's coming from Brahms, it's coming from Beethoven. So there was no creation of a new form that would accompany also the getting rid of the old harmonic system. So there is something a bit strange there for me, because Schoenberg, a friend of mine just shared with me some letters of Schoenberg speaking that he's trying to explain how form and stability relies on other parameters than harmony. And the way he uses to prove that is quite pervert, I have to say, like intellectually, because he says that look at these bad composers who it gives the impression of being an endless introduction because they don't manage to develop their ideas, but still they write in tonal language, so it's a proof that the tonal language doesn't help you to be stable. No, I think it's like a bit, the way of reasoning is a bit perverted here, because of course, tonality is not enough to build the form. And you can write tonal, if you don't have an idea of how to develop your ideas, it can still be very bad. But what I would like him to explain is how, without the tonality and using classical parameters to develop, like augmentation, diminution, inversion, modulation, how do you, for example, what the modulation brings in the development, it's huge. So if you are out of the tonal language, how do you replace modulation? This Absolutely. I would have been interested to actually understand.
I was thinking about that quite a lot, actually.
You know, yeah, how to modulate without being tonal. I'm not sure it's possible.
Well, to me, usually atonal fugues sounds awful, atonal sonatas sounds awful. And I would like to assure you, by the way, that being a composer, I'm not speaking from the positions of contemporary music. Yeah. Well, I'm trying to, take a larger context and understand it historically in perspective. Yeah,
and the contemporary, nowadays contemporary music doesn't mean anything aesthetically because you have everything.
Right.
Philip Glass would be contemporary, as well as Fernehoff, as well as like the most wild, dissonant way of dealing with sounds, to the most repetitive, like just on one chord or two chords, or the modal music, which is even, it's very funny that some composers, they would say, no, not tonal, but modal is okay. As if it would be like an medium step. Yeah. But actually modal brings to tonal. The music before being fixed with the tonality, it was modal. Like from the plain chant, like the Gregorian things, and it was actually modal, and then there was this need of modulating more, and then to make the modulations more powerful, the tonality arrived. Because when you have the tonality, you can really introduce a new key. When there is no tonality, when you modulate, it sounds just like sleeping.
Undulate rather than modulate.
Yeah, just sleeping, just sliding, sliding to another mode, but not really settling in another key. So I am interested in people experimenting, trying to find strong, convincing musical elements without this. But to be honest, and I have to be completely honest, it's not an ideology. I'm not here to be like reactionary, old-fashioned. I'm too passionate with music to not be honest. I personally didn't find a convincing explanation and demonstration that atonal music can provide the equivalent of strength with other elements. I didn't find it. So it's very personal, but each time I meet with somebody who would be, for example, absolutely passionate about the language of Boulez or Stockhausen, never was convinced by the arguments of the person. Never was convinced, because it was always trying to oppose to the arguments I would bring in favor of tonality, just asking the question, yeah, but why would it be necessary? But I still don't get the answer of, yeah, but why your other system, if it's the system, how do you can you show me how it works? Because with the language that was spoken by the composers from, let's say, Monteverdi or late Monteverdi, let's say from Bach, to make it more, even before there was Couperin and like the organ or harpsichord masters. So we could even say like from the Baroque composers until like Maurice Ravel, for example. So we have something like 3 centuries of not questioned system oriented with a tonal language, and you can see the diversity how to speak the language with so much diversity and difference. I would like to actually understand if somebody has an argument to bring that there are actually ways to get rid of that totally and still be so refined and still find so many variations in the same system. I didn't find yet, but I am ready to be challenged.
Well, continuing what you said, I have a personal story to share actually.
Yeah.
So some 20 plus years ago, I did Lucerne Festival with Pierre Boulez, and he was conducting for Stockhausen his own works, and Schoenberg and Weber and whatever. And I dared at some point, I was in my 20s, to show him my compositions. And I was like, could you please? And he was very eager. He was very eager to listen to music. And while he listened, well, his diagnosis was, oh, well, I think I like you, but why are you writing tonal music?
like a statement, like an ideological, now that Schoenberg has done that, it's impossible to go all the way back. But then how can you explain that this is still the music that got performed, that is like 99% of the music that we perform and that we study is still tonal, And this is still what we listen when we go bad, when we have a heartbreak. Doesn't mean that you cannot write. I'm very much in favor of atonal experimentations. Please do that and find marvels with this. It's fantastic. But then to say, no, now it is the new truth. Before it's old-fashioned, and it doesn't work anymore. It's not true. When you listen to Appassionata of Beethoven, it still really works, and it's still shocking. The aesthetic shock of hearing a Beethoven sonata in the 21st century. And I'm sure that what converted the young performers to the classical music was not an atonal piece. It was a tonal piece in most of the cases. I'm very curious about the ones who actually got converted to music through atonal stuff, but I didn't meet any one of them yet.
I'm trying to imagine.
So it's really like the statement that, 21st century cannot be tonal anymore. I think it's... there is something not honest in that, because when you look at even the atonal composers in the 20th century, the first to go for that, they were coming from the tonal school and they were reacting against that they had already in themselves. The problem is that when you go then for atonal and you don't know where it's coming from, but it's coming from tonal. So then you don't have a ground, you just like put notes on the score, get them organized with some mathematical rules that have nothing to do with the reference that is still the classical style, still, and it was still the case for Boulez or Messiaen or Schoenberg. So I think there is, sometimes it's a bit like the thing behind is laziness, is no, I don't want to have to deal with these tonal things, it's not necessary. I think it's laziness because it's actually very hard to master this. It's very hard to write a counterpoint with 3 or 4 voices, tonal, that is sounding rich. It's very difficult. And not a lot of composers today, they actually make this effort. They don't think it's necessary. And the thing is that it's true that for the audience to enjoy a piece of music, the audience doesn't need this to enjoy a piece of music. So it's really like a kind of what you want for yourself, if you want to actually enter the music with the wide door, or if you want to go for the very tiny breach that will actually let you get closer to some subtleties of the language. That why this rule of the fifths and the octaves? Where does it come from? The problem is also the way it's taught. If you have a teacher in a writing class that says to you, no fifths and no octaves, and you beg for, but why? And the teacher says, it's like this, it's a rule. Then you don't understand and it's bad. So,
are you quoting this book, Requiem pour l'Avant-Garde?
Yeah, Benoît Dutertre. Yeah, I know. Yeah. It's the rule. Why actually? Because it can sound very well. I mean, the parallel fifths, like if you like a, or. And there are many things even. There is nothing wrong about that. Why do we say in polyphony, no parallel octaves and no parallel fifths? It's because it's the first overtones. So if you do this between 2 voices, it sounds like one. Right. So you lose a bit of the richness of the counterpoint. It's not that it's forbidden because it sounds bad, it's that you lose the polyphonic richness. Exactly. So, and this is important to understand that That it's not like, oh, but these old rules, we are tired of these old rules. But did you first understood why? That it was to sound more beautiful. And beautiful, then you said, yeah, but beauty is a concept. It doesn't have to do with, I'm sorry, I think that the beauty of a seventh that is prepared and then resolved is quite universal. And that you can hear the beauty of a passage like this. If you have a modernist approach, a modernist would likely say the beauty comes from the boom, beep, boom, boom, boom. That the musical space is, you know, the narrative is cut between the registers, and that creates drama. Of course, it's part of the reason, it's part of the beauty, but it would be already beautiful to have. To have the chorale that is under this is already beautiful, and to have this heartbreaking that we hear, this dissonance, that a note after sounding is, that the note is still sounding after you play it, and all this is just, I mean, if this needs to be explained, that there is beauty in this, like some sort of objective beauty that is not that doesn't belong to a personal taste, that then you can choose to find this beauty awful if it makes you feel more intelligent. That, yeah, but I choose to find this beauty of Mozart not so pretty. I prefer the beauty of Boulez. I think it has more to do with a snobbish attitude than a honest relationship with the music. Then it's a matter of taste. Some prefer Beethoven, some prefer Ravel, some prefer Boulez. But to actually ignore this fact that the preparation of the sevenths and the dissonance in general, in the tonal language, you prepare the dissonances because this is what makes them sound dissonant. It's after the attack that the sounds continue, and it's there that it's dissonant. Like in this Baroque, when the strings, they kind of overplay the note that is on hold to sound more dissonant, you know? It's something that was found by these people who were looking for more tension and emotion with the tension. And this is still something that makes us react, that creates some goosebumps and everything like this. So this is still something serious to consider. And when you cannot say that a small child, after 100 years of atonal music, that a small child will have goosebumps listening to Mozart. You cannot say that he was brainwashed to think in the old way. And this is when I discovered Mozart at the age of 9. I was not brainwashed by anyone. It was a strike. It was just like a lightning straight to my soul that there is something incredible about that, and I didn't know about this. And now it's just a new world that opens to me. Then it was a surprise in my teenage years to see, okay, I was looking, who is the Mozart and the Beethoven today? What is the music, the classical music written today? And you can imagine that when I was hearing what I was hearing, I didn't understand the connection between what just took me and what I was just hearing. And I was not raised in a musical family. Nobody brainwashed me, you know? And then when there is this argument that some modernists take that would say, yeah, but to understand modernist music, you need to be prepared. You need to be educated, so then to enjoy the complexity of it. I mean, do you need to be prepared to enjoy a nice meal? Do you need to be prepared to enjoy the beauty of the sky on a mountain? I don't think that to have an aesthetic choice, you need to be prepared. It's also a matter of honesty, you know. There are wonderful things that you can get only after some training, but if with a work of art, there is not at least one thing that comes straight to you, I am a bit skeptical about this. To say that there are different layers in the appreciation of a work, for sure, but that at least you get caught by something of the work of art, you know. Sorry to be so long in my answers.
That was great. That was a great insight. Let me steer it into another direction.
Yes.
So how do you typically practice? How do you approach something absolutely new, or how do you practice the pieces that you already know? Is there any difference?
So I changed my way of practicing, and now I really learn the music I play from the score, not at the piano. So when I come to the piano, I already have a quite precise idea of what's going on. I even choose my fingerings in my mind without like not needing to feel with my fingers, but just imagining my hands on the piano and how I would play it actually. And yeah, to memorize the piece, I really memorized the harmonic progressions, exactly as if I would learn a jazz standard. That if you learn a song, for example, you will first learn the chord progression, and then you will add the things on the top of it to know where, to just simply know where you are, because of the harmonic rhythm I was talking about, and the importance of it for an interpretation. So I practice a lot in my head, and when it's about practicing at the piano, I save it for precious moments when I'm really super concentrated. I know what I'm looking for. I know when I sit at the piano, I want to research for this sonority or this timing to actually teach my hand what my ear wants. And it needs to be done with a full consciousness, not just letting the fingers run and just like, I have to do 2 hours of piano. And no. This is absolutely useless. So when you are very, very concentrated, I hardly can imagine that at the piano you can practice for more than 3 hours a day. Because 3 hours is a lot if you are extremely concentrated. And of course, even for the concertos with orchestra, I would actually really learn the harmonic progressions also of the orchestra part. I will not just learn the solos. I would make myself able to also play the orchestra part, like roughly, not all the notes, but just understand where I am and how it modulates, you know. Because when you are playing in concerto with orchestra, you're not playing all the time, but you are part of the process, and the way you will deal with like finding the right timing, getting organized with the time and everything, you have to consider the whole form. It's exactly like if you are a theater actor. If you learn your role, you still have to know all the other roles, because you will have to answer to some characters, and the way you will time your replique depends also on the other one. Right. So you need to know already what the other character will say to be able to create your own timing and tone. And it's exactly the same with the music. So I absolutely, totally avoid mechanical practice. I never practiced mechanically ever in my life, never. So it's always one finger on a key means one sound, and the sound has to be defined, even when it goes very fast. Any single note should have its own sound, and there is nothing decorative, even when we are doing something like this. Every single sound matters. There is nothing to not consider, even if you choose to give more importance to one voice than another, to actually have the right weight for the right note everywhere. Like. Another key. And now sadness. It's not just, there is actually an harmonic tension, there is actually the harmonic progressions, and this is what helps me to define. For me, the listening to the harmonies, whatever is the piece, brings me 95% of the interpretation. This is how I managed to actually practice on my own without a teacher. So, which is the case for 5 years now. I'm working on my own. I was looking for some strong musical element that would help me, like to give me a compass of where to go. Because otherwise it's an infinite of possibilities. You don't know what to do. Is there someone who can tell me how to play this passage? And actually the way to solve this is actually to look at the score, and before looking at how it's written piano or it's written crescendo, look at the harmony. Remove all the notes that are just like the arpeggios, the 16 notes, like just play the chorale under, and organize your musical thoughts and your timing from the chorale. There is always under any piece, there is a chorale. that is 3 or 4 voice clean counterpoint. In tonal music is like this all the time. So it's, you know, and even when you will like, when you will have like, you know, you don't need to play all the notes to understand. And then this is how, of course, if you practice, you will always have something else to think than the music. Always, while the music is there. And this is what actually guides you in the practice, that to build the phrasing, to just remove the orchestration elements for piano that were added for the composer, and to practice them only once the raw musical material is clear inside. And then, because then your ear cannot tolerate then for the sake of practicing all the 16 notes, you just drop the melody. And this is then in the practice, it's terrible, because then you'd spend hours practicing the 16 notes, you completely forget about the melody, and then the hand gets used to it, and then you have to unlearn what you taught your hand to get back to the melody. That is the main thing to learn to phrase. So,
right. Well, a little bit provocative question.
Of course,
well,
you're welcome.
Do you keep growing as a musician? What is it that you can do now that you couldn't some 10 years ago?
Yes, I feel that I improve, but it's from my personal perspective, like in my own research. I'm improving in that the sounds that I produce, and when I listen to my recordings, so first there are two things. You know, when you are a concert pianist, there is the recording, and there is the performance. Right. So these things meet, of course, they are connected, but somehow the studio approach, when you want to do a recording in studio and the concert, it's two different jobs inside the same profession. When I do a recording, through the years, I actually taught myself, learned to get closer. The sounds I produce get closer and closer to what I imagine in my mind. So I'm able, the connection between my fingers, the tip of my fingers, and my mind got closer and closer. So in that, I would consider it an improvement. And also, on stage, I'm much more free. I'm much more free because, you know, when we think about these concertos, for example, something like what I will play in a few days, like Beethoven Fourth, a few years ago I would have been absolutely terrified to play something like this, finding it impossibly challenging technically. And now I conquered some sort of really a freedom by what I found, mostly by myself, I have to say. Even my fantastic teacher, Rena, she didn't show me these things. How to actually not let yourself, and this is something that I told all of you basically, that to not allow yourself to hit a key before the finger is on it. Even when it's Mephistopheles, that the fingers, they are already there. And this is not something you see. When you see other pianists, it goes so fast that it's not something visible. But the great masters, I understood that they could not have the control of the sound because my priority was the control of the sound, okay? Not that to play fast. Like, it doesn't mean anything for me, like generally play fast, because it can be awful. It can be play fast but awful. What is the priority for me is the quality of the sound. How, for example, Richter achieves this quality of the sound in Feu Follet at that tempo. And then I just experimented, looked in the piano how to produce, and this is how I found this thing that is absolutely basic, actually. I wonder why we don't start from this point, that the sound is produced from the key, and that it's when you with the weight of the body, with the weight of the arm, that the position 0 is the depth of the key, like when you press it to the last point, that you cannot get deeper. And this is from that place that then you create the sound from there, because the hammer is close to the string, and this is how you can get the control of the sound at any tempo. And for this, you need to have the fingers already on the key, because you need to go down even when it's extremely fast, you know? So you always, actually, it's always like a time in advance, like a conductor. If you look at the conductor listening, it's always, the gesture is always in advance with the music. It's not like straight, because in his, for example, when he shows a horn entrance, the time that the sound get produced cannot be straight. There needs to be the air blown in the instrument, so the experienced conductor has to give a bit ahead of the beat, okay? Right. The piano is the same. We have to anticipate everything, and everything that you hear is actually has been prepared like microsecond before. So then you can have the relaxation, and this is something I absolutely didn't have before. I was like, because you cannot play, you know, when you have this, you need to be completely relaxed, otherwise you. And if you practice like this, you know, it needs, with the weight, then you feel the right amount of weight to actually to go from a key to another. With the weight of the wrist, the weight of the arm, and this is how also a scale using your arm, and not only like the small sound of the fingers, you know, like, but the full sound of the weight. This is how you can, yeah, I don't know, like all these trills. You cannot do this if you are not deep inside the key, you know. Or this, if you start practicing, you know, no, it's like with the chords, and just releasing the weight. So then you are not limited technically, and you can really do what is written, so pianissimo, and with the sforzando, with full control. You know, and this, so to be, this possibility to be really free of technical problems, I got only quite recently. It took me time, and to be honest, nobody showed me the way. A bit Pletnyov, when I spent some time with him on tour, because he was conducting, I was playing with him like Ravel G Major Concerto and Tchaikovsky First Concerto, and what we did else, like Shostakovich First or what. And we spent some hours at the piano, and he showed me things, and he showed me how, in Chopin Concerto also, how to get free with the right hand, completely free, to play with the palm, and to not feel stuck, you know, that this has to be absolutely together and like this. No. Like to find this breathing between the notes, and so just basically listening to him play and showing himself at the piano brought a lot for me. But technically, I don't think I ever had somebody who really showed me how to produce a sound. What are the tools to actually produce a sound? It was always most of the time, look at the score, it's written piano. No, the tempo is too low. No, more piano. No, more forte, crescendo. I mean, this is important. But how do you want to achieve these things with full consciousness, with full control, if you don't have the right approach of the keyboard? That you are not able to play, you know, just chord with the left hand and right hand like this with a full sound, with nothing in between, just letting the weight of the arms fall on the keyboard and listen to this full sound you produce without any restraint. You know, I don't think that anything is possible without that. I don't think that if you need to produce a forte, to do like this, you will never manage to control the sound. You need to really I'm not doing anything else than just letting my arms fall. I'm not like a you hear that the sound that is produced is awful. It cannot be like this. And it's the same when you have to do like octaves legato or everything like a what I forgot the music. It's actually, no, it's because I am one half tone higher. Sorry. Yeah, Chopin, Rachmaninoff, when you transpose, then it becomes very difficult to play.
That was the idea.
To always start from a full sound or a not be scared by the of the full sound, you know. So yeah, I think it's all these things. I think I allow myself to think that I improved through the years.
Oh, that was a very detailed answer. Thank you very much. Well, you used the word frightened. You said I would have been frightened of Beethoven. Now, well, it's really hard to believe that you would have been frightened of performing something. Have you ever really experienced stage fright?
Of course. Many times. Also getting lost, you know, like recently in a concert I got lost in the finale of a Scriabin sonata, and it was terrible because I knew it's a sonata I know very well, but sometimes on the stage, you know, you have to black out like this and you are not stressed. It's not even because you are stressed, but you have to deal with unexpected situation and learn accepting your fails and not starting to judge you, because we are humans, and as long as we look for the best in our work, we should not actually feel guilty when there is a fail. It's very important to actually make a difference between the fails that come from unpreparation and the fails that come because it was this day that happened. And it's painful, but it's like this. It's part of the concert life that we as humans, we are not made to actually play a 2 hours recital with full concentration and everything. So if a problem happens, it's quite normal, I would say.
There's this thing said by Sofronitsky, who was like asked by a journalist or a musicologist, well, they say about you that you sometimes play very good and sometimes not so good by accident. And he answered, well, look, you cannot play good by accident. You only play bad by accident. So you can never, well, if you play good occasionally, it's never by accident. It's well, something that you really, you know, worked for your whole life. Yeah, absolutely. Now, another question would be, well, I talked to a few Russian musicians, well, just generally about music, whatever, and many of them insist that, well, you know, whenever foreigners are playing Russian music, well, it's usually good, but something is lost. Well, you know, and François Couperin, I know, said similar things, well, 300 years ago, that foreigners do not understand French music because of the way we, well, write down our words, well, same way we write down our music. Is there still a thing like that, or music should transcend nationality?
Yeah, here again, I don't believe in nationalism in the arts. In general, I don't believe in nationalism, to be honest. I understand the nationalism when it's about like football game. Then when you stand for the flag and your team and national team, I can understand some elements of nationalism also that are related to some traumas of history, that then people can feel that gathering together as one, standing as one people, is then it brings some warmth, some spirit of solidarity. This I can understand. But that to say that there is like a French thing that only French would get with music, and the same for the Russians, no. For example, there are many cases where I really find the French interpreters to not be the best at playing their national music, where I find it, you know, extremely reserved, restrained, and shy in the sound, like how many French musicians, they play Debussy, Ravel, and Fauré with almost no freedom, with no full sound, but just tiny, tiny, tiny. I don't have this approach. And at the same time, sometimes I find the Russians very brutal with their own music, like playing very, very loud, very straight, very like bombastic, while there are so many subtleties in Rachmaninoff, even in Shostakovich. There's some refinement, and Prokofiev, there is a poetry of the sound that you cannot. I remember this pedagogue in Paris, I attended a masterclass, and she said, no, but Prokofiev, sometimes you have to bang. No, I don't think that's...
Usually never bang.
No, because for practical reasons.
If you love your instruments.
No, but when you bang, you have no sound.
Right.
You have a very short sound. And it's not even in tune, because when you bang, the string goes, so it's not even playing correctly what is written. So there is not even a fortissimo. You have to find a way to play fortissimo without banging, once again, from the keys, developing from the key and from the piano, to create the sound from the piano, not but vertical like this. Because there you would just like be aggressive, create a very short sound, and not even in tune. So.
Yeah, well, I was always amazed by this ability of some pianists to break strings on a concert piano.
Oh, well, yeah, but this is sometimes
it works.
Sometimes it happens, mostly when you are in a passage that is, of course, quite loud, and it's the way to deal with the pedal when there are too many overtones and too many strings vibrating, and sometimes like one string loses the course and goes off track. And then this is what can create, can be. Sometimes it's also how the piano is, the settings of the piano also, that makes the string more breakable. Actually, even when you really play like aggressively, once again, you don't have a big sound. So what happens is that, of course, the string can do like this, and so you can get the instrument out of tune very easily, but you will never have a big sound playing aggressively and vertically. Never. It's really, the big sound comes from the piano. You can have a disturbing sound, but not a big sound.
You know, I was recently reading this article by The Guardian or something like that. It's not musical, absolutely. So it was about scientists who caught a Greenland shark in Atlantic Ocean that happened to be 400 years old. And I was like, gosh, so this animal existed when most classical music that I'm dealing with, and well, I love so much, wasn't written yet.
Yeah.
So based on that, or based on, that it's possible to have a living creature that, predated all this music, do you think classical music is immortal? Or do you think it's going to have the same relevance in 300 years or 400 years?
And it's funny because I'm quite, I can share, this is very, very intimate and personal, but I'm a believer, even though I don't believe in immortality. So I'm a believer, but I still don't believe in really like biological, like life after death. I think that this is, unless if you have a child that actually you could survive a bit in your child or something. But there are many things that I could not get rid of faith. I admire a lot the people who are actually able to stand as atheists, but like really, because many people who say they are atheists, they are not. They are superstitious most of the time. So I have a faith because for me it's the less cheap that I can do rather than going for some superstitions. I cannot get rid easily of this of faith, but even though immortality for me it's hard to believe. There is something fascinating in the fact that Beethoven is still among us through his music, but this will not last forever. You just think that if a nuclear bomb is dropped, most of the surface of the earth can just disappear from a day to another, just for the pride of some government somewhere. And when you think about the limited amount of time that Earth still has, one day the sun will get bigger and bigger, it will swallow Earth, and there is nothing we can do against that. And it will swallow everything, all the beauties of the nature, all the manuscripts, all the pyramids, all the masterpieces. So I would say, like there is a French philosopher, Lévinas, he's quite interesting on that topic, that actually the real deal starts after when you are lucid about that. Don't get blind about that and deaf about that, but then that you realize how beautiful it is to make that these people, Beethoven for example, they made a masterpiece in such conditions that the masterpiece will one day disappear. So it's like a pure gift. It's not meant to be, I'm writing something on the marble that would be for immortality, like forever. When the humans, they speak about immortality, it's still from a human perspective and from a mortal's perspective. So the best we can do is actually learn our craft and make as beautiful as we, to learn our craft and actually master it as beautifully as possible, and to transform it into a gift to the other humans, following the example of the great composers. To not do this for ourselves. I don't understand why there are some performers saying, I play for myself. And why do you need an audience if you play for yourself? When you play in front of an audience, it's obviously you are here part of a communication process, part of a transmission process. You are here to embody the music. You have the mission to actually deliver the music to the others, to bring the listeners some momentaneous, how to say, travel in the sound that will maybe relieve from their pain or distract them in a way for a while. And this is a huge responsibility, because actually we are all facing this same condition, that we will all die someday. And the best we can achieve by being conscious of it and transforming it into something beautiful. Because if you just escape it, spend hours on your smartphone, just think, you know, this is the problem, is that these smartphones and these technologies, they make us feel we are invincible and immortal. Because when you spend this time on this, you forget that you are alive and that your time is limited. So the music for me, and the art in general, and even like being among our brothers and sisters on earth, starts when you are conscious of your death and the death of the others, and give priorities to the most relevant things, and not escape from this too easily. Of course we need to escape, otherwise we would be too anxious. So we are made to escape this, to always find something that will make us go for the next meeting, go to have a meal, enjoy something. So we are programmed as human species, as animal, to not constantly think about death. But this ability we have to be lucid about our condition, this is also what makes us able to do masterpieces that the animals cannot do. This is the consciousness of our limitations. And this is how Beethoven made himself able to move mountains musically. It's the consciousness of his condition. You know? So it's not only like, oh, I'm a musician, I'm a performer, hello, I'm a composer, hello. It's just like if it would be like, you know, in a video game, with like these little characters, hello, hello, and say, how are you? Oh, yes. No, we are actually flesh and bones, and we will become dust one day. And there are a lot of things beautiful that can only come from lucidity about our condition.
That's great. Can you tell us more about your music, your own music? Because, well, I know you compose, I heard actually, you perform your own works. Do you, well, I was thinking about that while I was reading this amazing book on interpretation of Mozart, and it turned out I didn't know that in his early concertos, Mozart would rather not notate his piano parts, because he was like, well, who else is going to play it? And then once he realized that, well, your people really need it, well, he started, you know, retrospectively notating. Do you notate your music? Have you heard it performed by the others besides yourself?
Yes,
yes. What's your process of composing?
I compose without piano. I compose on a table. I want to hear, to really not write a note that I don't hear inside. I take note of a lot of musical ideas when I get inspired by an idea. I'm not looking for ideas. They just come. Then I take note of them. And some of them only, they become obsessional. And from them, I understand that from this I can build something. If the idea doesn't come back to my mind and I don't get obsessed about it, I would better not. So maybe sometimes it appears like years after I take note of an idea, and years after I am back to it and said, oh, I will make a piece after this idea. So it's very different depending on the idea. And I always compose from the idea. When I have a theme, a melody, I need to actually build the piece really from the melody and understand all that the melody has inside. So, for example, like I just finished the second piano trio, and the main melody for the whole trio is very simple. It's a modal idea, but with an interesting thing. It's in 3 beats, and there is a syncopation. And I got somehow obsessed by this kind of rhythm. So if you're in 3, and then I adjust the. I see what happens with the dominant, and I see what happens when I put it on the bass, like. When I put it at the bass, or when I got the scherzo from the diminution of the same idea. And the contrary motion for the finale. It's the contrary motion. So when it's not only like just a technical, how to say, like just like Lego. It's just that when I have an idea and I'm obsessed by the idea, I try to meet with the idea and everything it can offer. And naturally the idea starts showing me the other face, or how it sounds when it's like augmented, diminished, contrary motion. And this, so then I start working, I take note of, okay, what it does when it's like, okay, and then the piece progressively appears. The piece appears from the idea. And for example, the second theme I found very easily because, you know, I just went into the holes of the first melody. The first melody, if you listen to the rhythm, it gave me the accompaniment. And everything will, so then it gives the impression that everything is generated from these fifths. And the second theme, like, it's actually just filling the holes of the first theme, like if you like. It's like in between. So but it's not like I sat at a table and I said, oh, what I can do, like what I can build or everything. It's just meeting with my theme, my original theme. It showed me other aspects, and then it made something that could be a piece progressively appear. I would say that the choice arrives after, is how you get things organized, how you become like a filmmaker, like how you edit, how you make the cuts, how you organize the transition. So then comes also the harmonic patterns, the harmonic structure. The themes actually has an harmonic shape, an harmonic face, and from this face I try to build all the piece from the harmony in the theme already, you know. So it kind of comes naturally, and then there is the choices to make. They are always made for me in favor, like to support the main idea. That should always be there. Otherwise, it's too easy, you know, to compose one piece with 1,000 ideas, to jump from an idea. I think that the challenge is to be able to, like if you are writing a novel, to follow your character in its transformation. That otherwise, can you imagine a novel when you will have, I don't know, like 10,000 characters, and you will always jump from a character to another, and it will be very frustrating, because you want to know what happened to this person. And we need to get attached to a character, and it's the same with music. You need to get attached to a theme. So I compose like this, and somehow the way I will deal with the musical ideas for a piece, they really depend on the shape of the theme. So some pieces would sound maybe for some ears more modern, or more modal, or more chromatic, but it all depends on the theme. It's not me, I'm saying, oh, I will do my style or everything. Yeah. It just depends. I try to work and give priority to my theme and offer to my theme a stage to express itself somehow. It's a bit like this. I don't want to be a revolutionary composer. I don't even expect to be an important composer of any sort. For me, composition is an organic, natural process. As an interpreter, I need to write music, and I really think that all the musicians, they should write a bit of music, even for their own health, for their own hygiene, you know. They write for themselves cadenzas, do transcriptions if they are not comfortable with actually giving birth to a new idea. to actually use the ideas of the other composers but transform them, do variations, for example, but to write music, because you will always be limited dealing with a composer if you don't write yourself. It's only by writing music yourself that you can fall in front of some problems that the composer were facing. So then you can understand better what is behind the score, and I think it's necessary for a performer. So I would really consider that for a performer it's necessary to write and to improvise. Because most of the composers we play, they wrote music and they improvised as well. And you get to understand a bit more what they were doing and why they wrote this like this when you actually get more familiar with this kind of practice, you know? So for me, it's part, I would rather dare say that composition is part of my performing activity, and performing is part of my composer activity. I don't put boundaries between. For me, it's the different ways of practicing the same thing, which is music.
Well, thank you very much. I was actually going to ask you about what kind of advice would you have for young musicians, but that was actually the best advice possible.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm running out of my questions at this moment. So thank you very much for being so detailed, and I should leave my place to, well, you know, those musicians who want to ask you other questions.
Yes,
so
sure.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.